Hi everyone, I'm Jane, and today we're gonna paint this cute and simple spring bluebird. Before we get started, make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and then check out the video description below for a full list of materials. Now let's get started. Okay, today we are painting on an 8x10 canvas. So this is just a little canvas. You're obviously welcome to use whatever size canvas you like. And I have a pencil, and we're gonna start by just kind of sketching out where our elements are gonna be, and then we'll put a little extra detail into our bird before we begin painting. So I'm gonna start with the branch that the bird is sitting on, just so I kind of know where to place him. And I kind of want another branch coming off of it here. And then we'll have a branch with some flowers right over here. So our bird, I want to place him right here, and I'm going to start with an oval. Not quite sitting on the branch. The head, I'm going to put the head inside the body, not up sitting on top of it. Then he's going to look like a snowman. So I'm going to put it kind of half and half in the body. And see, it's not right on the point of the oval here. It's kind of this way, and that'll help say that he's looking over to the side. We'll take this line from the top of his head down and kind of smooth it in with the body. So give him a cute little pudgy belly. And on this side, we'll just kind of bring it down into the back, swoop that down to the tail. And his legs will be kind of somewhere in here. Let's put his beak right about there, like he's kind of looking up at these flowers. And his eye will be right about there. Now, bluebirds have a very distinct color pattern, so let's kind of mark that in now. We have our blue right about here. The next color is the orangey brown, and it comes up around their shoulders a bit. So let's actually do that too. And the blue will come down right about there. Our brown is going to be somewhere in here. And then everything else will be white. I'm not going to worry about putting details into the branches. I just really wanted to know where they were so that I could make sure that I want it to look like my bird is looking at the flowers here, and I wanted to make sure I had room for everything. So before I start painting the bird, I'm going to paint the background because the pencil marks can be hard to erase, especially off of paint. So I didn't want to paint the background and then sketch it and have to deal with the pencil marks on the paint. So for the background, I've got some Mars Black, Ultramarine, and Titanium White, and I'm going to use my 1/2-inch flat brush. And I'm going to grab just the tiniest speck of black. See that? Not very much. About the same amount of the ultramarine, maybe just a hint more. And a good amount of white. I want this to be a nice pale blue. I don't want it to conflict with our bird. If you're not sure exactly where you want your bird, you can do the background last. Whatever you're the most comfortable with, I'm just going to paint over the branches because they're easy to put back in. But like I said, I just needed to know where they were going to be so that I knew where to put my bird. Just soft pressure to get rid of brush stroke lines, heavier pressure to lay the paint down. Just break that up so it doesn't look like there's a circle drawn around him. It's okay if we accidentally go into his body a little bit. That's not a big deal, because once we start painting in his body, we're gonna go outside of his body and into the sky too. So they can overlap a little bit. Okay, I had to move my camera because my long handle brush keeps knocking into it. So I decided to use a smaller canvas on this painting than normal because this is going to be part of a set. So there's going to be 2 paintings that go together, and the other one is for sure smaller. It's going to be about this size. So I wanted them to be as similar as possible in size. So that's why we're using a small size, but you can do the exact same thing on a 12 by 16 or a 16 by 20, whatever you like. Okay, so there's our background, and I can still kind of see my pencil lines, so that's good. That'll help me when I go to do the branches. Okay, now it's time to paint in our bird. So I'm gonna go to my number 6 round brush, wet it in my jar a little bit. And you can use matte medium here if you feel like you need to. I may or may not. We'll see how it goes. Just getting a bit of white. I'm going to pull it into the ultramarine. I want my color to still be, you know, pretty close to the darkness of the original color of the ultramarine, but just a hint lighter, a little bit more opaque. Ultramarine tends to be kind of transparent. And I've loaded a good amount of paint onto my brush. So we can start kind of filling in our bird. I'm going to use short little brush strokes. I'm going to let some of them go outside of his shape a bit. So that's going to help us say that he's a feathery little guy. He's got a little bit of puff to him. Just generally go around his eye. If you lose his eye at this point, it's not a big deal. See how I'm doing these short little brush strokes, and then I get these little fuzzy ends at the bottom, and that kind of helps start giving us the look of feathers. Take it down about to that line where the brown starts. See, just short little dashes. Don't forget that the brown comes up here and here on either side of his head. Now here in his wing, his feathers do start to get a little bit longer. So my brush strokes are really going to be the same, maybe just not quite as short. They're a little longer before I flick the end. Take that color all the way up to his belly. Okay, I cleaned off my brush, and now I have some burnt umber and cadmium yellow medium. And I'm mostly gonna get burnt umber, just maybe the tiniest hint of the cadmium yellow, just to warm it up a bit. Tiny speck of white, just to kind of help with the transparency a little. Not really to lighten it a whole lot for this layer. And we're going to do the same thing with the brown. I'm going to make sure to start up here I'm not trying to avoid the blue. In fact, see, I'm even starting up in the blue and bringing it down. Just make sure that you cover all of the little white spots between the colors and let that brown go outside of his body shape. Right into that white area. Clean brush again. I'm gonna get a tiny bit of my black, a tiny bit of my blue, and mix them with white. So I get a very, very pale color, mostly white. I'm looking for a bit of a shadow color there. Because if his belly is pure white, it's gonna look really dimensionless. I'm starting right up in that brown, and it's okay if a little bit of that brown picks up and moves into this color. Overlap the tail just a little bit. Don't forget to take it outside of his body shape, otherwise he's going to look very, very solid and not fluffy and feathery. Okay, now to do the highlights, we're gonna do the opposite. Rather than starting up in the blue, we're gonna start in the white. So I just wiped my brush off, I didn't clean it. And I'm just picking up white. And I'm gonna start up here. See, very small brush strokes, just the tip of my brush. Can you see there's not a lot of paint depositing, but also because that gray is still wet, it's kind of blending a little bit. I'm not trying to draw feathers necessarily, I'm just flicking my brush. See, I picked up quite a bit of white there. Let's go back into our brown yellow. I might put just a little more yellow into it this time. A little bit of white, more white than last time. I know he's looking super weird right now. That's okay. Same thing, short little brush strokes. Get him down into that white. And notice I am absolutely picking up some of that white. And that's okay. If our colors are too separated, then he's gonna look very stiff. And I don't want him to look really stiff. I want him to be cute and puffy. If you're picking up too much of that white, just wipe it off. I feel like this blue is up a little or down a little bit too high, so I'm going to bring the brown up just a little bit higher. Just grab some burnt umber, because that color I just laid on is a little dimensionless. Just put some darker swipes in there, and I might come back later and make sure I've got some of that lighter color in there too. Let's lighten up his belly just a little bit. So I took that same gray color that I did in the white section, just add a little more white to it. I'll just come in here and kind of brighten it up just a little bit. Okay, let's start working on his blue. So I'm going to get some of my ultramarine, mix some more white in it, get a color that's lighter. And we can just start kind of saying where those little highlights are going to be. See, my brush is barely, it's just the tip of the brush. Absolutely let it overlap that brown a little bit. And we can go a little darker. Just pull a little more blue in there. Let's actually get a little poke of black and mix it in with our blue. I still want it to be obviously blue. Just a little bit darker and kind of roll some of it off. I don't want a ton of paint. We're gonna shadow his face just a little bit. Well, it's not really shadow, it's just a little bit of a darker feathers on his face. Up over the top of his head a bit. Around his eye, and then they kind of bend down to meet the other feathers. Let's get just a hint of that in his wing, particularly right here at the edge. And under here by his tail, where his tail kind of hangs over and blocks it from light, from direct light anyway. If your feathers are looking too fuzzy, like mine were looking there, just grab a little point of water, mix it in with your paint, and then you get a little bit more of like a, you know, a bit that looks like a feather and not just a fuzzy bit. A little more blue, maybe a hint of white. And remember, his feathers here are longer than the feathers on his chest. So we're gonna let those flick out just a bit. A little bit of white, get some nice highlights in there. Don't worry if it's too bright. I think that might be a little too bright for me, but I can just get a little bit more of my ultramarine. You know what, let's put his eye in. Because since he doesn't have his eye yet, he looks kind of creepy. And it's hard to tell how everything is coming together. You know, once you put the eye in, it's a little bit easier to see how he's coming along. So this is just black. If your eye is too big, don't worry about it. You can put the blue in the areas that you don't want his eye. I want him to have a nice, big, cute, round eye. Let's put some of that black in his beak as well. A little more of that ultramarine, nice dark color. Little tiny point of water or matte medium. Because I don't want there to be a hard line where his beak meets the feathers. So I'm just taking some little feather-like brush strokes out there. Let's take some of that around the front of his eye. And up a bit. Oh, don't make him look angry. Big angry eyebrow. I'll take care of that. Just little hints of this dark color here and there. All right, let's fix up his face. So a good amount of ultramarine, a little point of white. We're just gonna kick back some of those super dark feathers we put in his eyebrow. I'm not gonna take it away entirely. I like the dimension that I'll get from the different layers. I just don't want him to look angry. And see, just after a couple little brush strokes, he already looks less angry. I'm gonna brighten it up right here between his beak and his eye. So you can keep going back and forth. So if you don't like the way he's looking, then, you know, just let the part that you don't like dry and paint over it. A little more white. There we go. Now he's starting to look fluffy. Just a little point of white, and then I just kind of wiped it on the glass so I didn't have a blob. Right behind his eye here. Give him some nice bright little bits. And some teeny tiny little bright bits in here. I want to say that that is where his wing overlaps what we can see of his tail. So by putting that brighter color there, so it's right up against that darker color, it's going to help us see that. I might actually pull the edge of his wing in just a little bit more. I think he's looking pretty good. I think I might be almost done with him. Let's just kick some of this back a tiny bit. There we go. A little pinpoint of white right on the end of my brush. Just off center on his eye. Oh, we gotta fix up his beak too. So I'm gonna get some black, just a bit, little bit of white, kind of wipe it. And we'll just come in here and say there's a little highlight right in there. And I may come back and add more to him later, but we'll see how it goes. I'm gonna wait until after I've done the branch before I do his legs. So let's go ahead and do the branch now. So I'm gonna grab some ultramarine, some burnt umber. I'm gonna mix them together. They give me a really nice grayish color. And this is closer on the burnt umber side, if you can tell there. You can redraw your branch with your pencil if you like. I'm not going to, because I can still kind of see it. So I'm going to start over here at my thinner end, kind of wiggle my brush and twisting it a little bit from side to side just so I get some variation and a few, bits that kind of poke out, make the branch look a little more natural and lumpy. Putting more pressure on it as I move down. And I had another branch kind of coming from here. We have another branch over here. Let's pull a little bit more burnt umber in there and fill in our branch a little bit more. And we can reshape it too if we need. So I'm doing a lot of twirling with my brush. I don't know if you can see, I'm kind of going like this as I do my branch. And I know that, we've done that quite often, like in the Summer Flowers on the Fence video, I think might have been the first time we did it. And I hear a lot of people talking about how they had the hardest time twirling the brush. And I didn't understand what could be difficult about that. I didn't understand what people were having a hard time with. But every Sunday, Saturday or Sunday, I do what we call a viewing party with the people in my Patreon group and YouTube sponsorship. And we watch the previous week's video and they ask questions about it so that, just to get a little bit of a better answer to the things that they didn't understand. And I do demonstrations. And brush twirling was one of the ones that we talked about. And I finally understand what it is that people have a hard time with brush twirling. So we will go over that here in just a second. But in the meantime, if that sounds like something that might be helpful to you, you can join my YouTube sponsorship. Just click the sponsor button on any one of my videos, or join my Patreon at the $5 level, and we do that every week. So it turns out that when people were having a hard time twirling the brush, what they were doing was watching what the tip of the brush was doing and trying to control that. So if they were trying to make a flower, they were spinning the brush really fast, like whoosh, like that, which kind of flips it out of control. Or they were trying to draw, let's say, a flower petal, like that, and trying to keep it in that straight line while still twirling it. So they're doing one of these things, trying to make sure that line stays straight. Well, there's no point in twirling your brush if you're gonna just try and force the line to be straight. So what it is my focus is just right here. I'm not paying attention to what the tip of the brush does. I really don't care what the tip of the brush is doing. That's the whole reason for twirling it. So as I'm going, I know that I want to start here, and I generally want to end there. That's it. Now I put my brush there, and notice I'm not putting flat pressure. My brush isn't flat, it's just the tip of the brush. And now, between here and there, I'm just gonna focus on rolling it from one side to the other. That's it. It's not quick. I'm not micromanaging what the tip of my brush is doing. Back and forth. And that's how you get these nice, kind of organic shapes. Don't try to, make a straight line while twirling it, because all that's going to do is frustrate you and you get that really stiff looking line. It's all about putting it down, twirling it, and letting it do what it's going to do. That's what brush twirling is. So if you've had a hard time with that, pay attention to what it is you're focusing on. Are you focusing on the tip of the brush, or are you just focusing on getting from point A to point B while rolling your brush? Who cares if it goes off onto, see, I totally changed direction there. And if I were drawing a branch, perfect. And I would say, okay, my branch has an angle there, and then it comes down this way. Keep twirling it, and see, now my branch changed shape. And I have a much more organic, natural looking branch than if I went, you know, to draw a zigzag. So it's just like those flowers we did on the summer flowers on the fence. I think I did put a little more pressure on it, but it's still just twist, 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 done. All of the flower petals. That's it. Okay, let's start on some moss. So I'm gonna get my ultramarine, and I like to use the ultramarine cadmium yellow mixture for green because I feel like it's a much more natural looking green than the phthalo blue yellow mixture. That mixture is super, super bright, and I feel like it's not very good natural green. Put a little poke of white in there, and I'm keeping this on the bluer side for this first layer. We're just gonna start adding some moss. And you can put it wherever you want. I'm not gonna cover my entire branch, but you could. See, I'm gonna roll it. See how I'm rolling my brush? And notice what that's doing. It's pushing it up toward the edge when I roll upward. See, I push my thumb upward, and that gives me a higher concentration of that color up on the top of the branch. But certainly you don't have to do that if that's difficult for you. You could just kind of dash it on wherever you want it like that. That's okay too. I'm just going to put it in a few places. We don't have to say this branch is completely covered in moss. Kind of dash it out a bit. And we're going to have some moss on this branch. Let's go even brighter. Just grab some of the yellow, a little point of white, because I'm using the Basics cadmium yellow, so it's very transparent. I was going to use my heavy body, but I know not everybody has heavy body, and I've used my heavy body cadmium yellow the last few times, so I figure I'd give it a break today. I'm just going to dash it on here. That green that I laid down before is still wet, which is nice because then they're blending a little bit. But that's also dangerous because if you overwork it, then you're going to lose those colors. I want the colors to exist there together and blend a little bit, but I don't want to lose one or the other. If you're worried that you overwork paint and that you're going to lose one, then just let it dry. Let it dry before you move on to the next color. It doesn't have to be wet. I just kind of like putting the wet color onto the other wet color. And you can blend with the tip of your finger if you need to. I'm so excited for spring. I don't know if you can tell, I've been painting a lot of flowers lately, which isn't something that I normally do. I don't paint a lot of flowers. But I am pretty excited for spring this year. Let's go one lighter with our moss color, and I'm really just going to use the yellow and maybe just a tiny poke of white. And I'm just going to put down kind of hints of it, just dashing it. And if anything is too bright, just grab a little bit of your burnt umber, maybe a tiny poke of the ultramarine, and you can come back and just kind of dash into it a little. The moss doesn't have to be all green. You can have little bits that kind of look more orange. When I was growing up, we had these 2 black walnut trees in my backyard, and the north side of both trees had this really hard, bright orange moss, and it was really, really beautiful. So I think it's okay if you've got some little bits in there that kind of appear orange. And I think the more colors you have in there, it's going to look a little bit more natural. You know, a tree is not just brown and nothing else. I really like that little orangey color. I think I'm going to keep going with that for just a minute. Just kind of popping it in here and there. I think it adds a nice contrast to the green. Okay, I'm going to take my number 2 round brush, wet it, and I'm going to take some black, maybe a hint of the ultramarine. And we're going to give our birds some legs, and they're going to be very simple. We're just going to kind of come from here, bring a line down, and another one from here. We can just insinuate some little claws. A little poke of white, just kind of wipe it. Maybe a little more than that. Just give a little highlight. And if you feel like the feathers look like they're on top, or the leg looks like it's on top of the feathers, we'll just get a little bit more of that grayish color, whatever color the feathers are right there. And we can just take like one feather, just like right over top of the leg. And that pushes it into the body a bit. Let's actually get just a little bit more, almost pure white. I just want to brighten him up in here. There we go. All right, I'm just going to make a couple of touch-ups onto our bird before we move on. Still using my number 2 round. I'm just going to give him some little light spots right around the bottom of his eye. Maybe a little up here, just to define it a bit more. And I feel like I want to bring the shoulder of his wing in just a bit farther. Just right in here. There we go. He definitely needed just a hint of some lighter color right there in the front of his face. Maybe not that much. Well, actually, I think that's okay. A little bit more white on his belly. And then I think we're gonna move on. Okay, I've got some Alizarin Crimson, some Naphthol Crimson. You could also use Cadmium Red Medium and some Cadmium Yellow Medium. You can really use any colors you like here. You could even use purples or blues, whatever. I wanted to use some warm orangey colors because I feel like that'll create a nice contrast here between the cool background and the cool colored bird to have these nice pop orange colors. So I'm using my number 8 filbert and I'm wetting it a little bit, just wipe a bit of that moisture off. And I'm gonna start with my Naphthol or Cadmium Red, like I said. Cadmium Red Medium. They're pretty close to the same color. So I have a good amount loaded up on there. I'm just gonna decide where I want some flowers, and I'm not gonna like draw flowers. I'm gonna do a few dashes in almost a random pattern. So I'm gonna use like the edge of my brush sometimes flat. So kind of like this. So sometimes the edge, sometimes flat, sometimes over here. Just something kind of like that. So let's start right here. See, I'm not really drawing very specific flowers. Maybe we'll do maybe a little one right here. Let's see how that is. We can add some more if we like. I'm just gonna wipe that on my paper towel. I don't wanna clean the red off. And I'm gonna pick up some of my cadmium yellow, kind of squishing it in so it mixes loosely with the little bit of red that's still on my brush. And I'm gonna come in here and just kind of dash another one in. It can overlap those colors. It can kind of be a little bit more separate. But I'm really just doing like one, maybe two per little cluster. Now I cleaned off my brush and I'm gonna get some alizarin. And I'm gonna do even a smaller petal, definitely overlapping, and really just one per flower. And this alizarin is quite transparent. Now don't judge your flowers just yet. I know they don't really look like flowers. Don't try and make them look like flowers, just go with it, and I promise it will look much more like a flower in a minute. So I'm gonna get some of my cadmium yellow and a bit of my ultramarine. I'm using my number 2 round brush again. Just mix up a green color, a little drop of water. And let's do a few little stems. You don't have to get real specific with your stems. Just kind of start somewhere, come down, and then I'm gonna put some heavier pressure and spin my brush a bit so it's got kind of a thicker spot where it connects to the branch. Just insinuate that that one comes down like that. Let's bring like a little bud out. Maybe we've got another one here. Just kind of up and push for a little nub on the end. Let's do more over here. Kind of down and a little bit extra pressure so there's a bit of a nub where it joins the branch. Maybe we've got another little bud up there. Maybe this one comes right off of the end. We can highlight that, grab a little poke of white. You can throw some brown, some extra yellow, whatever colors you feel like is gonna help it look like it belongs on this branch. I think I'm happy with that. Let's do our little stems on the other flower. I'll throw a little extra yellow into this one. Maybe it looks just a little bit different than the other one. Now I'm going to grab some yellow. I'm going to mix it with a little poke of white. I'm going to give each of those buds kind of a little bright spot on the end. Maybe it's about to start opening and there's a little flower inside. Can take a little bit of a darker color if we like, and just kind of run that under the pods or buds, whatever they are. I feel like that yellow was a little aggressive, so I'm just gonna wipe a bit of it off. There we go. Okay, back to my filbert. Let's finish up the flowers and then we're done. So I got a little bit of ultramarine, a little bit of quinacridone. I want a very dark purpley color. And if it's getting too purple and not dark enough, just grab a little bit of your Naphthol Crimson or Cadmium Red, whatever it is that you're using, and put it in there, because the ultramarine and this red will make a very dark color. I don't want a ton of this color on my brush, so I'm wiping a bit of it off. I just want a little bit. And wherever I put the Alizarin Crimson, I'm just going to kind of come in and dash in a little bit of a darker spot. A little bit of a darker contrast in there is going to help make these pop, look like flowers a bit more. They're just very impressionist flowers. Now I've decided that his brown on his chest needs to come in a little bit farther. So I'm going to do that real quick. See, I'm always telling you guys to stand back and look at it. And sometimes when I'm filming, I don't, until I decide I'm done. And then I see things that I wish I would have done differently. And this time I decided to do it. Okay, now he's done. And there's your Bluebird. I hope you enjoyed painting this with me, and I hope you stick around, because coming up soon, we are gonna have a watercolor version of this very same painting. I've been messing around with watercolor for a little while now, and I'm super excited to bring some watercolor tutorials to you guys as well. If you try this painting, I would love to see what you do with it. Make sure that you find me on Instagram or Facebook. Just search for Painting with Jane so that you can share your painting with me. Thank you as always for painting with me, everyone, and I'll see you next time.